Well, so it looks like we are live now, here on Writer Showcase number 72.
And again, it appears we are hosting ourselves.
All right. Well, folks, we're just waiting for one more person to join up later, and then once he's come along, then Dunn will pop in for us. In the meanwhile, shall we, you want to take this first, or should I lead?
I believe you should lead.
All right. So, this is something I've read two pieces from this piece, well, two chapters from this piece so far, but I've never actually read the first chapter of my fan fiction, Logan's Lost Days. So I think I will start off with this chapter, the first part of it, Logan's Ascent. This was originally a one-shot, but I decided to flesh out the rest of what was going on later. So, here it begins, just as soon as I can put on my Michael Kramer impression. There we go. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind began to rise on the peak of Dragon Mount. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time. But it was a beginning. Down the slopes the wind rushed, cooled by the night and pulled down by its own weight. It blew over soaring cliffs, down slopes with sparse coverings of grass, and finally reached the bottom of the mountain, where it blew through the long, dark hair of the young man climbing up the slope. He was Logan, scion of the noble house of Ablar of the land of Gildan. He was tall, broad-shouldered, just shy of his middle years, and he was determined to scale the summit of Dragon Mount. He did not precisely know what had driven him to travel about the land as he did. Perhaps all those hours in his youth of sitting in the family library reading the travels of Jain Farstrider long into the night had kindled a sense of wanderlust inside him. Perhaps he wanted to see the world and become a better ruler by the experience. After all, the common folk of Gildan might distrust strangers, but a lord could afford no such luxury. That was what he had told his lord father and lady mother as he set out those many months ago, and even he hadn't been convinced by the lie. But perhaps there was a grain of truth to it after all. He had been told in Cairn that the best liars knew how to use the truth, and perhaps he had. Then again, maybe that was just more Dice Daimar nonsense. Maybe his wandering was an expression of the madness that came with channeling. Logan had managed to keep his talent, his curse, secret for the better part of 5 years now, and he seemed sane enough, to himself at least, but it was only a matter of time. One day the taint would overcome him and he would go mad, destroying everything and everyone he held dear. At least that was what happened if the Red Aja did not catch him and gentle him first. And then what? What did Red Sisters do with men once they had been gentled? Did they turn them loose to face the wrath of the people they might have killed? Did they hang them quietly in some secret White Tower dungeon? Did they keep them alive in the tower to make sure they didn't get up to any mischief? Nobody was completely sure. Even Gwer Amalasam, the most famous false dragon of the Third Age, had all but vanished from the histories after he had gentled. He might have evaporated into smoke. Logan glanced back over his shoulder. There was Tarvalin shimmering in the distance, barely a half-day's ride away. If he was really so curious what the Red Aja did to men who could channel, he may as well just ride up to the gates of the White Tower and find out for himself. Logan suspected that at least part of the reason he had managed to hold off the madness thus far was because he had found other things with which to occupy his time. Hobbies, he thought derisively. as if any of those austere activities could compare with the sheer ecstasy of Sidene. Logan suspected that to the average person he must seem like a whirlwind of activity, and all of it carefully calculated to keep him from indulging his craving for the one power. He hunted, he rode horseback, he read every single book he could get his hands on, he taught himself to read the old tongue, he scouted with rangers in the Forest of Shadows, he prospected for alum in the Mountains of Mist, he served 2 tours of duty with the Legion of the Wall. He tried to learn the sword, though his instructor said he was never likely to make a proper blade master. And, of course, he traveled. But here, less than half a day's ride from the White Tower, he needed no other incentive to keep himself from touching the source. Logan stumbled. Fool. He should have kept his mind on the task at hand. Even at this altitude, not a third of the way up the mountain, one false step could send a man tumbling down the slope to break his neck. He looked down to see what he had tripped over. A corpse. He wasn't surprised. He had heard tell of the many corpses that were said to litter the slopes of Dragonmount, the remains of fools who had thought to win glory eternal by being the first to scale the mighty mountain. Logan looked again. Something was strange about this body. It wore a gray-brown coat with loose breeches of the same color, and its head was wrapped in cloth, its face hidden behind a black veil. An Aielman. He pulled back the veil from the corpse's face. It was badly decomposed. It must have lain here since the Aiel War nearly 20 years ago. Logan would have only been a boy of 6 years when this poor soul died. All that remained now were the bones and a few wisps of blonde hair. Blonde? That was rare for an Aielman. He had never been to the Aiel Waste, but Logan was almost certain that all Aielmen were red-haired. Still, it was not a long way from red to blonde. It was hardly inconceivable. He shrugged and continued up the slope. More bodies followed the first, in varying stages of decomposition. It was a grim sight to be sure, but Logan couldn't help but laugh on the inside. Had none of these fools known how difficult climbing could be when one failed to bring supplies and proper equipment? Logan had commissioned a brand new set of crampons and climbing spikes before setting out on his journey. In Cairhien, he had spent a small fortune on jerked meat and pilot bread, and he had filled several canteens in a clear stream before starting up the mountain itself. Hardly a tasty meal, but he would keep him alive longer than whatever meager provisions those long-dead climbers had thought to bring. He probably should have resupplied at Tar Valon. It was closer, but he had ultimately decided against that. Climbing Dragonmount was danger enough for one trip. The slope increased even further. The grass, already sparse at this altitude, vanished completely. By now, the incline was so steep that Logan practically had to walk on all fours to keep from falling over backwards. It was only just shy of midday when he reached a sheer wall of rock. He stopped for a moment. It was as good a time as any to catch his breath. Besides, he would need all his strength for the next leg of the climb. He reached into his pack and pulled out a pair of crampons, which he fastened to his boots. He also pulled out a pair of climbing spikes, freshly forged in Johanna. Finally, he wolfed down a hard biscuit and washed it down with a swig of water. Logan was as ready now as he would ever be. He drove the spikes into the wall and began to climb. Pace yourself, he thought. One limb at a time, just like Garen's wall back home. Slowly, inexorably, he crawled up the stone face. His climbing spikes found crevasses, his boots found outcroppings, and Logan pulled himself up another foot, another inch. Gusts of wind battered the cliff face, but still he climbed. The sun reached its zenith, but somehow it was less warm than earlier. His muscles ached from the exertion, and he was breathing heavily, but he kept going. Finally, Logan reached a small lip of rock jutting out from the cliff face. Respite. He scrambled over the lip and onto a level slab of rock. He shivered. The air bit shrewdly, and it was bitter cold this high above the ground. He had prepared for this, of course, and he pulled a large fur-lined cloak out of the pack. As he wrapped it around himself and sat back to catch his breath to munch on another piece of pilot bread, he noticed another figure sitting beside him, a skeleton reclining against the side of the mountain. He looked closer. This skeleton wore a heavy pack, a coat trimmed with fur, and its gloved hand still clutched a rusted climbing spike. Logan frowned. That man was no amateur. He had come prepared, and he had died just the same as all the rest. So, Logan thought, Dragonmount hasn't just claimed the lives of rank amateurs. It has bested experienced mountaineers as well. That was unsettling, to say the least. Logan picked himself up and took stock of his position. He was well over halfway up the mountain now, but from here the way would be all but vertical. He took a deep breath and once again attacked the mountainside with his climbing spikes and crampons. Upwards he crawled, towards the cloud-shrouded peak of Dragonmount. The wind was even stronger up here, and the air was beginning to thin. How was that even possible? How could less air make for stronger wind? Still, Logan pushed on, willing himself ever upward. The impossible wind tore at his cloak, trying every second to snatch it away from him, but he would not be dissuaded. He was going to make it to the top of Dragonmount. He would make it. Finally, it was all too much. The thin air, the exhaustion, and the bitter cold finally caught up with Logan. Try as he might, his muscles could not force himself up another inch. Burn it all, he thought, panting. Is this how it ends for me? Logan wondered how many other climbers before him had suffered the same fate. How many had simply run out of energy and dropped off the mountain like overripe fruit to splatter on the rocky ground below. Logan looked up. There was another lip of stone directly above him. So close. Just a span and a foot away, not even his own height. Yet as close as it was, it might as well have been a league. There was no way he could force himself to reach it in his condition. He could feel the climbing spikes slipping from beneath his gloved hands. He snarled. No, this was not the end. Not here. Not today. There had to be some way out of this. Logan could sense the true source. It pulsed just beyond the edge of his perceptions, beckoning him, enticing him, taunting him. He paused for a moment. If he channeled here in full view of the White Tower, he would almost certainly alert the Red Aja. Was he really prepared to take that risk? What was he thinking? This was no time for self-doubt. Logan reached out for the source. His stomach lurched from the pollution of the taint, but still he pressed on. Finally he grasped it. Sidene. Life. Ecstasy. And power. Such power. He drank deep, seizing as much of the power as he could possibly hold. Yes, more. Give me more. Logan felt the power surge through him, the accompanying rush of adrenaline burning away all his exhaustion. He was powerful. More powerful than any man living. Logan began to laugh as he forced himself upward. He pulled himself over the lip of the outcropping and collapsed, heaving, utterly drained, but still alive. The burst of adrenaline from seizing the source had given him just enough strength to climb to safety. He was more exhausted than he had ever felt in his life. Light, he could run 1,000 leagues and still have more energy left than he had now. But he still held Sidene. Even in his exhaustion, he was still powerful. He laughed again. Logan undefeated. Bit by bit, his strength returned to him. As soon as he could lift his hand, he reached into his pack and pulled out a fistful of jerked meat and stuffed it ravenously into his mouth. He washed it down with an entire canteen of water, barely bothering to chew it at all. If mother could see me now, he thought, imagining the fit his lady mother would throw if she caught him eating like this, like some black-veiled Aiel savage. He didn't care. He was alive. Logan shoveled more jerked meat into his mouth. The meat was bland, even to his sardine's sharpened taste, but burn him, he had never tasted anything so delicious. Logan glanced upward. Dragon Mount still loomed above him, beckoning him further. Even now, in his ruined state, the mountain still tempted him onward, luring him like a baited fishhook. Logan shook his head and smiled. He would go no higher. He could not conquer Dragon Mount, but neither would he let the mountain conquer him. He'd come this far, further perhaps than any man had come before. That was victory enough for Logan Ablar. Logan turned away from the mountain to gaze out across the land that stretched below. He had never seen such an incredible sight. League upon league of lush green country stretched as far as he could see. Tarvalon had vanished behind the bulk of the mountain, but Kyrian was visible. Light! Kyrian! He had left from there 4 days ago, and there it was, sitting proudly on the banks of the Alguenia. Kinslayer's dagger and the spine of the world towered free behind Kyrian, standing sentry at the edge of the desolate Aiel waste. To the west, the great Braham wood was a great mass of dark green, and beyond it to the south, Camelin shimmered in the distant sunlight. Even further to the south lay the hills of Kintara, and beyond them, far Madding, where great Terangrial shielded men and women alike from the true source. A man could hide there, Logan considered. Live the life of a respected city gentleman, find a wife, raise a family, never touch the source again. The Red Archer would never know. He shook his head. Running and hiding was the coward's way. Off to the west, the great flat plains of the Carolane grass stretched for hundreds of leagues beyond the Black Hills, and just at the edge of sight he could see with his Sidene-bolstered vision the faint outline of the mountains of mist. Logan had never imagined such a sight. It was like looking at a map, a living map the size of the earth itself. But if this was a map, well then where were the countries? On every map Logan had ever seen, the land had been clearly divided into countries. So where were they? He looked again, and found the river Eranin, which marked the ancient border of Andor and Kyrian. Or was it the Alguenia? Or the Luan? Or some other nameless tributary? Was it even a river that demarcated their borders? Perhaps the two countries had drawn some arbitrary line in the air between their lands? And then it hit him. "There are no countries," he said to the empty air. How had the revelation escaped him for so long? Nations and countries, what were they but lines on a map? What made one bank of a river any different from the opposite bank? How could an invisible line in the air possibly affect the simple village folk that it crossed? Countries only exist because men deceive themselves into believing that they do. And men would kill for them. How senseless to die for a drawing in the air. How many peasants had been devoured by Andor and Kyrian's perennial attempts to gobble each other up? How many poor Gildanan lads had been killed over the years in petty border skirmishes between Amadisia and Altara? Further to the south, Ilion and Tyr had been laboring under a centuries-old vendetta, and what had they accomplished but to sow the plains of Moredo with corpses and water them with blood? Something had to be done to stop this madness. But what? Could one country unite all the others beneath one banner? That was unlikely. All the countries have been trying to do that for centuries, and to little avail. If the many nations will not unite on their own, Logan thought, then they must be made to unite. But what man could possibly bend all the nations of the world to his will? Logan knew the answer as well as anyone, of course. The Dragon Reborn. Prophecy said that the dragon would return one day. He would break the world, it was said. He would break all bonds and oaths and bring suffering to the many peoples of the earth before leading humanity to the trial of the last battle. An ominous prophecy, to be sure. Yet, if all peoples were to be united, the existing nations would have to be broken so that they might be remade. The prophecies themselves said, he will face the shadow and bring forth light again in the world. It was the only way to achieve a lasting peace. Yes, if Logan would serve humanity, he must serve the Dragon Reborn. Or perhaps... On the slopes of Dragon Mount shall he be born, so the prophecies said. Logan had been born in the Mountains of Mist, like his father and his father before him, but he had always found the old tongue to be a remarkably malleable thing. Birth could easily be taken to mean rebirth, and was this newfound purpose of his not a rebirth on the slopes of Dragon Mount? Born of a maiden wedded to no man. That passage would seem to disqualify him. Aye, he and every other man living. That clearly had to be a trick of speech of some sort. The old tongue was full of these little intricacies, ready to be exploited. Certain dialects treated gender strangely, others disregarded it entirely. And if birth was being taken as rebirth in this context, then could not this passage be construed as the idea will present itself to a young, unmarried man? This is a bit of a stretch, Logan admitted, but it was workable. He will be of the ancient blood and raised by the old blood. Ah, now there was one much easier to interpret. It clearly stated that the dragon would be born and raised by a family ancient in nobility. In this, Logan fit perfectly. The noble house of Ablar, like much of the nobility of Gildan, traced its lineage back to Garen, the ancient hero of Daolan, which would eventually become Gildan. Some families even traced their lineage back to ancient Manetherin, though the connection was tenuous at best. Whatever the extent, Logan's veins clearly did not lack for ancient blood. The rest of the prophecies concerned themselves with deeds the dragon would accomplish before the last battle. Those would take care of themselves, given time, Logan thought. The only other passage that stood out was the one concerning the Stone of Tyr. The stone would never fall, so the prophecies said, until the people of the dragon come. That gave him a goal to aim for. If Logan could raise an army and take the Stone of Tyr, the nations of the world would have no choice but to recognize him as Luz Theron Telamon come again, and he could set about uniting the nations of the world and lead them triumphantly on the march for Tarmangaidon. Of course, it wasn't going to be easy. Logan suspected that many people would not believe his claim, and still more would believe him and oppose him nonetheless. Maybe King Johanna and the Crown High Council would try to seize his estate and revoke his title. And there was little doubt the Red Aja would come after him in force once he made his proclamation and word got out that he could channel. No matter. Logan would simply have to bind them to him, like the rest of the world. Logan stood, looking out over the land he would one day unite. He drank deep of the source, seizing more and more of the power. He laughed as Saidin filled him to the brim. The fetid contamination of the taint splattered across his soul, but he didn't care. He was powerful. The most powerful man in all the world. Light, such power. I am Logan Ablar, he shouted to the winds, and an echo carried his words back to him. And I am the Dragon Reborn. And we will leave it there for the moment.
League's better than the show.
I'm interested in what they're doing with the show. It's
No.
Oh, obviously you're done now.
I just got finished watching episode 6, so I've been following it.
Have I been
He's a very different character, but still, it's workable. It's workable.
Pardon me, but have I been unmuted all this time?
Yes,
Oh, bother. Sorry. I hope nothing was audible.
you are fine.
What's that?
Also, I agree with Becca's earlier comment. You are too good at this.
Aw.
Every time I
thank
read
you.
something, I think of you.
Yeah, that Logan from Dragon Age. Yeah. When I first posted this thing on DeviantArt, half the comments were, "That's not how you spell Logan," and it was all this stuff, and I didn't really, and I was just like, wait, who are you talking about? There are two Logans.
How do you spell Logan?
Wait.
I've been spelling it to run with Rogaine.
Wait a second. You posted your fanfic on DeviantArt?
Yeah.
You do that? Like, that's a thing that people do? I thought it was just art.
Yeah, you can post text on it.
Yeah, the
Oh.
other chap, what's his name? Oh god, what is his name? Codex. He's posted stories on DeviantArt too. So apparently one can.
I mean,
I've
the
never
rest of
done
the
that.
chapters are on fanfiction.net, but
That's sort of odd. You've got one chapter there in one place and another, all the others in a different place.
well, it's it works. It's good to have multiple places to put it.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Make sure the people can't delete it quickly. Yeah, backups.
All right. What's that? Hard biscuit. All biscuits are hard, you frickin' American.
Well, they're not all equally hard. Jaffa cakes are, for example, digestives are harder than Jaffa cakes.
Well, I don't know. I'm gluten free. Nothing's hard for me anymore.
Oh.
Your mother's also gluten free.
Okay. All right. So.
So anyway, yeah, that was interesting. I don't know if I have no idea whether in the books he has any monologues like that or not in the books. I have no idea.
He doesn't actually get a POV chapter until the last battle. That's
Wait.
one of the things that actually prompted me to write this thing. I love this character. I just absolutely adore him. I mean, he's refined. He's strong. He's the strongest male channeler in the whole story who isn't either irredeemably evil or literally Jesus. He's got that prophecy hanging over his head. Min's prediction of power and glory, and you honestly get the sense that he's like the ace. He's from the nobility. He's got all these skills rattling around. If this guy really was the dragon, the story would have been finished like that. But he wasn't. He honestly, he could basically have been the Vegeta to Rand's Goku. I don't know if that comparison makes sense, but that's how I discovered it.
No, it does not make sense to us, at least.
Because we, or at least I, are not weeby enough to get it.
You don't have to be a weeb to appreciate Dragon Ball Z, okay? Dragon Ball Z is mainstream.
Well, not for me, it isn't.
It might be mainstream, but it's like how I avoid now Star Wars. I just avoid that now.
Well, you can't let the modern, how the things have been screwed up nowadays distract from the classics. The classics still exist. The classics are still valid. But that's the thing. That's the story of that. Basically, Logain's struggle is not so much about acquiring more power, but learning to let it go, learning to let other people handle things, learning that humility.
Brightness says, "Do I need to get out the burning kit?" Oh no!
Oh boy!
For once, this is not targeted at me. This murder threat.
Yeah, good. So where were we? Yeah, because in the show, I don't know if Logan is going to play a role after. I've only got through episode 5, so I don't know if he does anything in future episodes or not. I've no idea.
In the book, he has like one scene, so I'm like, I have no idea what's gonna happen.
And the
with
Eye
him.
of the World. Yeah, the scene that with Okay, spoilers for episode 5 of the Wheel of Time series for anyone. But the scene that happened in with him looking up and seeing Rand and laughing madly, that was supposed to happen in Camelin before he was gentled. So I guess they're flipping around some of the timestamps here. But
yeah, I noticed that.
But I mean, you really get a sense that this guy is the show stealer. They got all these fancy muckety mucks coming up before him, and all the people coming up after him, and it really just seems anticlimactic after him. It's the thing that they mentioned him. He's just wearing ordinary clothes that would not have passed vacation comment in any village, but the way he wears them, he is a king in every inch of him. And I don't know about how others writers looked at it, but as far as I care, if you quote the Bard when you're describing someone, that character is automatically significant.
Yeah.
I actually did have a Shakespeare reference in that chapter.
Oh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Care to point it out?
No.
If you read, I don't remember it. Sorry, I was distracted.
You also came in halfway. Well,
Yeah.
third way.
Yeah, I came in partway through, so I might not have even been here.
It was from Hamlet. Just to say.
Probably wasn't to be or not to be, because that's too obvious.
No, of course not. The air bites shrewdly, it is bitter cold.
Oh, good. That's a nice,
Of course.
subtle one. That's one I wouldn't get because it's been like years since I've read Hamlet.
All right. Well,
We also are taking over Dun's empire, you and I.
we should probably pass this on to the next one.
I guess
Aspiring,
I'll go.
Balerion, who wants to go next?
I shall go.
Well,
Wait, do you need to go AFK, Balerion, at 4 o'clock? Is that usually how it happens?
yeah, or a little before, yeah.
So should we maybe get you out of the way first?
Probably won't take too long. I'm going to finish off the, oh, why if I start coughing now? It's so pardon me, gotta have me some water. What was I saying? A couple of things from the chat. Whiteness says, yeah, Aspiring, it's not always about you. Contrary to popular belief, I actually murder people other than you. And Johan says to stab people in the back is the best way to kill them. So that's a useful tip.
But burning is fun.
Well, in the words of Christopher Lee,
Peter, dear boy, do you have any notion of what it sounds like when one is stabbed in the back? Because I do.
Can you do Morgan Freeman for a second? Can you do that?
Morgan Freeman. The best thing about this is that you are probably hearing this in Morgan Freeman's voice. It's amazing. This ability that human beings have. Just by conjuring up the image of a person, you can immediately bring up the most memorable thing about them. Why, there could be absolutely anything written here. And in your mind, it would sound amazing. Because you have Morgan Freeman narrating it.
Wouldn't it be
Titties.
Holy shit!
Wouldn't
You're
it be
so
alright?
good!
Wouldn't it be alright if everyone in the world were actually Carl Sailor doing their voices? If everyone in the universe we didn't actually exist, he's just mimicking our voices, and he's the only person who really exists.
dude,
I
don't
agree
give
with
away the
that.
twist.
Father.
Hey, that twist's been done before. Jakan Hakar is secretly everyone.
Figures. Okay.
But yeah, I agree with that guy. Carl does an accent stream would be great.
Oh yeah, I'd love to do a stream all about accents. Actually,
Hey, maybe you can teach me how to do one that's not shit.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Balerion, you ready to go?
Yep. I'm gonna finish off the rabbits today, and then afterwards, next month, I can move on to other things. There are other weird.
Finish off the rabbits.
Finish off the rabbits. Yes.
Finish off the
Отлично.
chickens.
Продолжаем.
Okay. So, chapter 16, diegesis like so makes the rabbitalist narrative transhuman because we rocks. Yeah. Boss takes credit for my genius, and I'm posting the last chapter of Watership down between conferences because I did a paper on the Renaissance debate about is the marvelous total crap? Because some dudes like there isn't really sirens, and Cersei didn't really turn people into pigs and trees and stuff, so fiction is a lie. That's bad, so don't read that crap. And Jerry Chintz, he's like Italian critic. He's like, yo, dudes, get a grip. And I'm doing a paper about the critical reception of Tolkien because the modernists are like, we are so all that because we're the dominant aesthetic paradigm, and they're so all about being the cool set in the cafeteria. And Tolkien is like the unpopular kid. And as soon as he enters the cafeteria, they're like, you sucks, we rule. But Tolkien's like, dudes, you so don't determine what's cool and what isn't. And you so don't like define if I'm cool or I sucks. And they're like, WTF, LOL, exclamation mark, blah, 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 blah. But then they really, totally, seriously lame stuff like, dude, who's like Tolkien sucks because Zed is evil in his languages, and I'm like, totally not making that up. And then there's the dude who's like, Tolkien sucks because Tolkien fans wear anoraks. And like, whatever. So the rabbits, then they chilled while the alfalfans and the hutch rabbits got it integrated into Watership Mall social normativity, and they're a dandelion told a story about a fairy wong dog that's so postmodern it can't even be deconstructed because the infinite series of deconstructions. And I try not to say X is impossible because that's imposing constraints on thought stuff, but come on, dudes. How do you deconstruct something like titled Rouseby Wolf and the Fairy Wong Dog with dialogue like, I'm the messenger of the great dog's body of the East, Queen Dripslobber, and with a delicate overtone of rotten camel. And the rabbits, despite knowing what a palace is, or for that matter, aristocratic distinction, didn't know that camels are grody cigarettes. Maybe because cigarettes is something humans do to trope their bad. And what menial cringing shall be mine? I shall show myself a true dog. That trope's rabbits think dogs are big on social hierarchies. Though robots have outslas, that's rabbits that advise the chief rabbit, only they don't abase themselves except in alfalfa, and the queen got attendants called Poswiddle and Smith Sniff Bottom that embodies that dogs are hierarchical lamers, but note that the rabbits are being essentialist, and then they use narrative to make the dog go away so they can bees on a beam property by taking the vegetables the dog was guarding. And you can't get much more postmodern than the great rat spirit of Sumatra, the Curse of Hamlet. That's intertextual too. So the story rules. But I'm so not telling it here because I got other diegetic stuff to do. So anyways, the rabbits were recovering from all the postmodernism when Holly and Blackarov are like, hey dudes, There's alfalfa rabbits coming. We gotta get underground and fill in the holes. Because when rabbits left on the boat, Wundortov Authority is so out of here, dudes. The officers are like, he's totally Thorn. That means emo. And he did a Politburo meeting, and Snowdrop-Off says, let it blow over. They got short memories, and we can use propaganda to construct new memories. Wundortov's like, no, we're doing patrols. They found the rabbits near a fox and followed them to the warren, and Wundortov's like, it's not very big, especially compared to ours. We literally spelling rule. So they did reconnoiterance stuff, and Wundortov leaded expedition to Watership Mall. Whoever went on the expedition got its special privileges, like they could Silflay, that's go up to eat whenever they wanted, and they get dachas and stuff. Only it got messed up because the hobbits saw them, so they lost the element of surprise. Sun Tzu would be like so PO'd, dudes. And Captain's like, sorry I wasn't with it when I saw them because this vodka dude, sir. And Woodward says, oh well, we'll still beat them because their social organization is crap. And you'll still get a dacha, only a little smaller because our nomenclatura is totally meritocratic. Meanwhile, Hegel decided to do diplomacy, so he goes up to Wundorthoff and he's like, yo, are you General Wundorthoff? Yeah, says Wundorthoff. What's it to you, loser? What do you want? Says Hassel. We are gonna whoop your butts like how we eliminated rabbitalism, says Wundorthoff. And he took off a stone that got kicked to his foot and a stump, and he's like, we will bury you. Oh, wait, sorry. Let me reread that last one. Then he took off a stone that got stuck to his foot, and he hit a stump with it, and he's like, we will bury you. We better come to terms to prevent bloodshed, because if you try, we got military stuff too, you know, said Hazel. Okay, the terms are, you extradite Bigwig and Blackarov and the Does, and we don't kill you, said Wundorthoff. No, I got a better diplomatic proposal, which is we do detente and trade ties and do glasnost and stuff, and we make new warren in between ours, because your warren is way overpopulated, and your iron hedgerow makes your robots discontent, but if you give them freedom, they'll be like, wow, is like Haggle. And rabbits got enough enemies without doing cold wars or hot wars. And I'm thesis, you are antithesis, so let's do synthesis, dude. For a second, Hazel's diplomacy was hitting Wundorthoff, and he's like, huh? But then he says, that's crap. We're going to get you, so whatever. Then he split, making a rude noise, and talks to his officers. Captain's like, let's just siege them, dude, sir. No, we need a fight and victory to boost morale and instill confidence in the regime and stuff. And we got to get back to Africa so we can do more purges, said Wundorthoff. So they started doing dig tactics. Meanwhile, the Watership robots digged in and hide in the sleeping burrows. I'll be here when they get in, says Bigwig, because he's on the strategizing front lines. Then Hazel thought it a grand strategic maneuver. Get Silver and the other... What? Get Silver and the other... What even is this? Get Silver and the other officers, he says to Big. You guys do defense? Well, me and Blackberry and... Pardon me. And Terry Dandelion do covert... do covert stuff? We're going back to Nutty Farm again. That's where the Hutches was. So they go to the farm, and there's a dog, and Hagel chewed through the rope, and Dara Dandelion incites it by reciting postmodern theory with lots of like transhumanism. Back at the Warren, the Alfalfans hear the animal that's not a rabbit. It sounded like a terrorist demon monster. LL. Boss, there's a scary animal. Eek. Is like the officer rabbits, but Woundwartoff's like, if there's an animal, it'll find out I'm an animal too. So he goes in with two officers, and they heard the boss prepare to go first into the depths of Anime Warren, calmly as if looking for dandelions. The officers' spirits rose, and they're like, maybe we can win without fighting at all. By like transforming the consciousness of the proletariat, dudes. They broadcasted propaganda messages about breaking chains and stuff, and Bigwig put on camouflage and hid in the tunnel per strategy and tactics stuff he and Captain Holly come up with. Remember, Rabbit tactics are all about aggressive, not strategizing about numbers on each side, because rabbits don't count good according to human paradigms and stuff, because they don't do that. Hey dudes, let's count stuff thing. So Woundwartoff goes down the tunnel with rabbit tanks. They're like big leaves of lettuce that roll over stuff. Suddenly, Big bites Woundwartoff is like, you told me to impress you. I hope I did. LOL. And Woundwartoff's like, I told you I'd kill you, mofo. And kept it advancing. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the dog looked like it loses interest in Dara Dandelion's deconstruction. So Blackberry enraged it by doing anti-dog satire. Woundwartoff says, why are you throwing away your life for these lamers, dude? Join my side and I'll give you a lot of power and dodges and make you commissar and stuff. Silflay Raka Ambler Hurrah, says Big, and that's Rabbit for bleep you. Whatever, dude. But this union of alfalfa and socialist Warrens remains open to you if you change your mind, says Woundwartoff, but the downside would be that he gets purged, but he didn't say that. But Big's like, my chief rabbit's like, hey dude, defend this Warren. So I'm doing that till he says something else, because that's how authority patterns work. And the African rabbits are like, he's chief rabbit, OMG, WTF, question mark, question mark, question mark. Like, whoa, dudes. Meanwhile, an Ouslifer named Vermin got confronted by Fiverr, the psychic rabbit, who's like, sorry, you're doomed, dude, but that's how this diegesis works, because you Jews betrayed socialism by turning it into a power structure. And Vermin freaked out. And suddenly, Captain, run for your lives, because the dog is running towards them, infuriated by Dara Dandelion's radical theories and Blackberry's wicked impressions. So the alfalfans all scram except the ones in the burrow, and Woundwartoff's like, dogs aren't dangerous if you got the right paradigm, because they're just running dogs to the bourgeoisie, but they're like, whatever, we are so out of here. back at the farm, Lucy rescued Hegel from the categorical imperative. LOL! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Blah, 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 blah. And she's like, hey, Dad, I am taking this rabbit to the doctor because intellectual validation of stuff. Pardon me. Then the narrator does her dad's thought processing without quotes and blur the lines between character and narrator, which is modernist, but thinking in lower class dialect is because the author does classist, essentialist and crap. And he lets her take Hegel to the doctor, who fixes him and drives him back to the Warren. With Woundwarthoff gone, Captain took over the Alfalfa Hobbits and decided to do a treaty with Watership Mall. But first they went home. Some African rabbits were left in Watership and defected because they were prisoners and because they liked buying stuff. Hazel woke up big and Biggie said, yo, Chief, dude, is finished Mr. Vundvor? Yeah? Question mark? Question mark? Blah, 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 blah. WTF. Then they did confab about it over coffee beans and did contested narrative about Woundwarthoff. Captain Helly says, Woundwarthoff is unnatural. That's why he failed, because market forces are inexorable dudes. And he was so not rabbit, because I'm essentialist. And Groundsky was an Alfalfan prisoner, and he's like, dude, you don't get it. He's not dead because nothing could kill him. He created the new Soviet rabbit and made us do stuff no rabbit ever did before, like build a new society. That was awesome. Yeah, said Hazel. And we are doing convergence because under Captain Alfalfa's got more market forces, but we got some marks and stuff to keep out LLs, says Hazel. And Bigwig doing army training so we can be tough like Africa but keep our freedoms, said Buckwheat. Some rando. And they dug through the borough wall and chewed through the iron hedgerow, and they bought lots of stuff at Watership Mall, and Alfalfa got at tourist shops where they sold pawports and secret police costumes and stuff. It was a mecca. Only then there was former officers turning into oligarchs, which kind of sucked. But fracas happens, and Watership Mall prospered, and they did diegetic stuff that created an overarching national narrative and identity, and the Empire totally wrote back because they're post-colonial, which rules. And Hegel is diegetic. What? Diegetically turned into a elder states rabbit, and Dara Dandelion constructed narratives that said that we rule, but cleverly undermined them and literally undermined because she digged under the main burrows and stuff. Okay. What did that? Should be. And consider the names that might be used to designate the new era following postmodernism. The prefix trans turns out as being totally in because Blackarov's like, Fiverr is majorly doing trans subjectivity, dudes, because Fiverr turned mystic and you reconceptualize reality, which is awesome. And Bigwig's like, yo, Hassel, Africa's so trans utopian. And the dogs are like all about trans sentimentality, etc. WTF, OMG, LOL, exclamation mark, and like the American cultural theorist Eric Gans is like, victory thinking's kind of lame because it's based on a non-negotiable ethical opposition between perpetrators and victims. Because Woodward was a jerk and bullied rabbits who weren't power structures and tried to do genocide stuff to Watership down. Gans is like, the ethics of postmodernism says the peripheral victim rules, This is the utopian center occupied by like perpetrator, which kind of sucks in its resentment of capitalism and liberal democracy because they're like totally long-term agents of global reconciliation, dude. So let's do non-victimary dialogue. So Hegel funded his writings because they're a convenient prop to the social order and stuff. LOL. And that's the end of that.
Oh boy.
Okay, Boomer. That's just the only thing I can really think of right now.
Yep. I did catch Glasnost and Detente.
Yeah, there's a number of references. There's also the new Soviet Rabbit and the Union of Soviet Social, something that the Union of Falcon Socialist Warrants or something like that is also in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy. Yeah. And that's it. That's how the Communist Rabbit Project comes to an end.
Well, they do convergence and stuff. But now, of course, they've got tourist shops and oligarchs and all that rot too.
Aw, that is sad.
Very sad, yeah. Yeah.
So Yeltsin Rabbit came in.
Oh God, no. I mean, yes.
That is.
And then after that, we probably got Putin after that.
Yeah. Well. All right.
So,
Okay, so what do we got in the comments? Yeah, Becca says, I honestly have no idea what I'm supposed to be imagining when you read this, Balerion. Anthropomorphic rabbits, regular rabbits who have shopping malls and shit. Oh, Putin is a rabbit. Oh boy, that's terrifying.
yes, that is terrifying. Yes, that's a very frightening thought indeed.
Yeah.
You killed Johan.
Yeah.
What, yikes, what happened to... What? Oh, whoa. Poor chap.
I don't know who else is watching besides Becca. I can see two people are.
I'm gonna go now. The flashbacks are coming now. Emo and Tolkien are the same subject. Did I just hear Balerion use the word emo? Yes. This is one of those fake youth culture things. They'll use words like that. But of course, it's all very, because this was written like 6 years ago, so there was no such thing as chads or tisms, and even if there had been, and even at the time, this lingo was probably old-fashioned, even at the time when I was using it. How many times does "so the rabbits" occur in this? Quite a lot, probably. Why are they talking about Tolkien? I don't remember Tolkien. Maybe you could teach Eric to do an English accent. I think that's someone else. No, that's you, Carl, not me.
Oh no, we have lost Johan to the weaves.
No, he just couldn't. He just couldn't take it, which is surprising. He's pretty tolerant usually, but this was just too much for him. Well, that's that. The next, I do have other parodies. They're not all like this. Some of them are relatively intelligible. There's the French version of there's a version of the Count of Monte Cristo if he lived in Middle Earth. Yeah, that's not surprising because there's even a trope you all know about this one, the totally radical trope. You've all heard of that one. You've all heard of that one, where the writers of these television shows directed to teenagers are all of the middle-aged, mostly probably guys. So they're trying to do youth culture lingo, and they fail miserably, of course. Not to mention that even if I'd succeeded, this was like half dozen years ago. So emo might. So some of these words might have been in them, but aren't in now anymore.
Becca, You have no idea how accurate that statement is, actually. I'm pretty sure the last time someone used the word emo for me was legit fucking 10 years ago. I remember it very clearly because they were saying I'm an emo for having scratched up my arm and looked like I cut myself.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. They knew I didn't. They just were like, bully little kid. He's smaller than us.
Oh, how lovely.
He's dog eat dog world.
But what was I going to say about yeah, and it's got leet language, which there's a bit of leet language in there too somewhere, because if you look at I'm not showing my screen, but there's like all these 3s and 0s and stuff from leet language and things like Walksor and stuff, which is done like even earlier, because that stuff was like from the beginning of the century. I gave her feelings of nostalgia. She's remembering the happy days of her childhood. Not gonna lie, hearing the word emo gave me good nostalgia feelings. So you're good, Balerion. Aw.
But, yes, I believe it is mine. So, but hey, Becca, were you here for the last one? No, you weren't. No one was here for the last one, were they?
Was the last one the 69 one?
I believe so.
Yeah, I was on 69.
But,
Yeah.
do I need to revise what that chapter was to make you all remember it again?
Just do a previously on.
Yeah, a brief recap, probably a good idea.
Previously, we are now in a new POV. The character's name is Q. He is assisting a group with hijacking a ship. We just saw him kill basically an elite security unit. Now it's otherwise occupied as humans. Okay. Yeah, so new character. I'm interested to see what you'll think, Becca. And I'm interested to see what Carl thinks, since he's the only other one who's seen that chapter. Another one of her recruits let out a pained cry as they got shot by a plasma bolt. In her peripheral, Mitra saw that the man, a Maquis male with red skin and yellow hair, had gotten everything from his elbow down scorched off. Cradling his arm, the Maquis was doing his best to avoid touching the charred nub. He was pulled away by one of her medics. Good. Better to be shot in the arm than the head. There are prosthetics he could be outfitted with, though she would never likely give him a plasma rifle after the day. Those prosthetics were no substitute for one's real arm, but you'd still be able to work, probably in maintenance. She couldn't say the same for some of her other recruits, Mitra thought as she glanced back at the bodies lined up behind her. The sound of someone hurling made Mitra grimace. Whoever they weren't the first to do so, and she couldn't blame them. This was not how she planned on breaking them into this life. Grunting her teeth, Mitra aimed her rifle and shot a royal guard on the left side of their head as they peeked over the corner. They flopped down into the corridor connecting the two vessels, the blight plasma arm having melted right through their helm, before being pulled away by their comrades. She pulled herself away as the plasma bolts passed exactly where her head had been, threatening to have her meet the same fate as the royal guard she just shot. That was cutting it a little close. Mitra turned to her second in command, Silica Aiones, a slightly short, stocky human with short black hair and thin eyes. Any word from our space host? Silica shook her head. I'm telling you, they got him. Mitra cursed. Menak hadn't been very skilled as far as space hosts went, but he was still a space host. Her eyes drifted to another Maquis, this one a green female with hair tentacles that reached just below the shoulders. You know, Silica penetrated into her thoughts, we may have to. No, Mitra said firmly. She knew what Silica was suggesting. That Maquis was the only other full space host they had brought along on the mission, besides herself. Q will be on his way to help flank them. And how is Pretty Boy going to manage that? Kill an entire Royal Guard unit with his perfect teeth? Silica scoffed at her own remark. She thought that Q's reputation was highly exaggerated. He'll be able to draw away similar to fire at least. And maybe kill all of the royal guards, Mitchell added with a half shrug. Besides, they weren't in any position to try risking their space host. Both the cargo ship and her stealth frigate had their Ethian shields active, which created a barrier against space hosts. Inside either shield, a space host can't use their powers on anything outside of it, and a space host outside the shield can't use their powers on anything inside. What Silica proposed earlier was to open a pair of portals that both face the royal guards, giving them cover from their plasma bolts, and move them until they were stopped by the Ethian field. Then they would send their space host to reach where the two Ethian shields converge, so she'd be inside both shields and then teleport into their ship and help from within. While using the portals as cover would work, the convergence of two Ethian shields creates a third area where space hosts can't affect anything outside of. What would need to happen is that the Maquis would have to first cross the first convergence of shields and the second, so she's outside of their shield and inside only the cargo ships. While in that area the convergence creates, her space host would be left vulnerable, unable to portal or teleport outside of that area. And if she managed to survive that, what would Mitra have her space host do? Royal guards were trained at combat hosts, and had the equipment to do it. Mitra would be sacrificing yet another space host for nothing. No, she would wait for Q, assuming he arrived in time. They didn't have much plasma to spare, and the recruits were burning through the stuff to keep the royal guards from charging in. They weren't going to be able to keep up at this for much longer. After firing a few more shots of her own, Mitra's comm pinged. Q? The one and only. Letting out a sigh of relief, she asked, "Where are you right now?" "Around the corner. You could probably shout and I'd hear you if there wasn't so much plasma fire." "Where's your infiltrator space host?" "Still haven't heard anything," she said with a grimace. "Good riddance." Mitra ground her teeth but forced her anger down. She could yell at him later. "Royal guards are firmly rooted where they are. You think you can create a diversion so we can rush their position?" "I have a spread setting I haven't tried yet. Let me see." Mitra's attention was suddenly drawn away from Q as, without warning, the royal guards in the corridor to the right were launched by a blue wave of energy, scattering them like blown leaves. Some of the royal guards on the left split off from the main group toward what he assumed was Q, but another wave of energy sent them back as well. "Mitra?" Scud called uncertainly. Her eyebrows cocked and mouth ajar. The look she gave her was one of pure bewilderment. "Yes, that's for us," she confirmed. "Everyone, forward!" Her recruits stood up and went down the corridor slowly, keeping to the right side. The royal guards were falling back, and Mitra noticed many of the ones that had been knocked back by the energy wave were starting to recover before being either shot down or fleeing with the rest of them. Whatever Q had used didn't appear lethal, at least not to the royal guard. It'd be up to them to finish the job. Waiting until the conflict moved farther down the ship, Mitra teleported as far as she could down the corridor. Her surroundings changed in an instant, and she felt a bit of whiplash in a blocked teleport. A few more steps forward, and she tentatively opened the portal. A small blue ring started to grow in front of her, but she stopped almost immediately, keeping it only to the size of her eye. She was within the cargo vessel's Ethian shield. Closing the portal, recruits passing her and pursuing the fleeing royal guards, Mitra slung her plasma rifle onto her shoulder. She wouldn't be needing it, at least for the time being. Silka and the recruits could handle mopping up the royal guards now that they were being forced back. She had something else to deal with. Approaching her, Q looked like an angel of the executor, with his almost exclusively black clothing, with only the tiniest bit of blue running down the edges of his coat and hat. He had his atmospheric suit extended all over him, the portion covering his face making it mostly featureless. In the bright corridor, it looked almost as if he absorbed sunlight around him, like a living shadow. In his hands were the weapon he just used, looking unusually long in his hands. She kept her expression impassive, but as he approached, Mitra looked him over, concerned. His coat was tattered all over, burned away. The shirt underneath didn't appear to be any better, and there was one spot that went all the way through to his skin, which was burned almost as black as his clothing. What had happened to him? "Your savior is here," he announced half-heartedly, spreading his arms out limply. You half-wits seriously couldn't handle this without me? His arms dropped back down to his sides. Mitra's concern evaporated, replaced with indignation. She stepped up to Q and swung her hand at his head, slapping his hat. The hat stayed firmly on his head, not budged by the slap. Mitra felt her face grow red. While Q's face was obscured, she got the impression he was raising an eyebrow down at her. They're Etienne attached, remember? She, in fact, had not. Despite working alongside him for so long, she always forgot his hat used Etienne attractors to keep his hat attached to his head. Using Etienne like that with clothing wasn't unheard of, but it was uncommon, especially for a hat. Who nowadays wore hats? Forget the hat. Mind explaining why you took so long to get here? Mitra demanded. Long? He cried, taken aback. I got here in a few minutes, from the other side of the ship, and on a different level. And during that time, several of recruits were either injured or killed. She pointed toward the line of corpses in her ship. Q looked over and grew somber. Despite his calmness towards hosts, Q did have respect for those who fought alongside him. Where had you been? And what happened to you? You remind me of Mark or Vamper after a battle. Those two drew more gear than you do, I swear. He looked back at her. Fighting a Royal Guard unit. Her eyes widened. That would explain why Q looked like you had been in a war zone. How many are left? None. I took care of them before you called. She swore he was smiling smugly behind his suit when he said that. I swear when I said he would kill them all earlier, I was joking. Partially. Holstering one of the MKRs in his coat, Q spun the other in his hand. Now I believe there are some retreating Royal Guards to clean up? Mitra dismissed the notion with a wave. My recruits can handle them. They've lost their ground and too many of their members. They might retreat to the frontal bridge, Q pointed out. Hold up in there. Let them, Mitra replied. It'll make it easier to dispose of them. I'm going to send Salak to the engine room, want you to accompany him as insurance. The central bridge team will have to do without you for this next part. They better, he grumbled. We're just space spenders, Q, she reminded him firmly. We've been through worse without you. You have, he agreed, crossing his arms. But not these soft bellies. She turned away, heading for the frontal bridge. No, these recruits hadn't been through worse, but they had her, and that was going to have to be enough. Standing with her hands on her hips, her Commodore overcoat pushed back, Mitra stared at the closed entrance to the frontal bridge. One of the recruits, Dallas, if she remembered his name correctly, was standing beside her, plasma rifle at the ready, though it was hardly necessary. He was a McKee with light green skin and combed back red hair, and a concerned expression on his face. He glared at the entrance as if expecting it to attack her, and occasionally flashed a glance down the corridor. We're perfectly safe, Dallas, Mitra assured him. He snapped his head toward her, a shocked look on his face. She had gotten his name correct. If that's true, then why bring me here? On the off chance I'm wrong. And she preferred the company. Q was doing what she had asked, for once. Silica was sweeping the ship of combatants, and Maxillian was leading the team assigned with taking the central bridge, so she was forced to take one of the recruits with her. Her words did not comfort Dallas, evidenced by how his screen grew even lighter, almost gray. After some time, the color returned to his skin, and his grip on his plasma arm wasn't so tenuous. So, when is the rest of the team getting here? Dallas asked. We are the team, she told him, watching him in the corner of her eye. As she thought, he grew pale again. But there's a team for the central bridge. Insurance, like you. Don't worry, we'll likely not need to shoot anything. But then why are we waiting? Mitra knocked on the bridge entrance with her knuckle. The frontal and central bridge are separated from the rest of the ship by their own Etienne shield, preventing me from teleporting or portaling in. And we're circumventing this how? She smiled deviously. You'll see. This will become somewhat routine for you after today. Waiting a little longer, Mitra finally got the ping she was waiting for. Mitra here. You two ready? Salak is ready when you give the word, Q confirmed. In a moment, Malika said, bringing Silica and Maxillium into the channel. Q was about to have Salak cut the power, have the recruits ready to attach to the hull. Next to her, Dallas' eyes widened with shock as he scrambled his belt for what the space benders called the Etian puck, which was a small handheld Etian attractor that was attached to their belt. They weren't as effective as the Royal Guard's boots, which had Etian tractors on the bottoms that could be activated via a brain implant, but the puck was good in a pinch. As Dallas got his puck out, she waited for him to put it away. He listened hesitantly. She got confirmation from both Silica and Maxillium that they were ready, and Mitra gave Q the order. A moment later, the lights in the ship dimmed heavily, everything but emergency power cut off from the ship's systems. Life support, atmospheric shields, and the comms would be working at minimal capacity, and the rest of the vessel's functions would be inoperable, including Etian shields. It also, unfortunately, shut off the artificial gravity. Mitra herself was unaffected by the zero gravity, having used her powers to keep herself firmly on the floor. Dallas and his clothes, however, immediately started to float up, his eyes widening as he rose. Mitra absently waved a finger, and Dallas dropped down with a thud, landing in one knee. "Okay," he said slowly. "I'm liking this." "You're about to like it a lot more," Mitra commented, closing her eyes. She had seen schematics of the ship and knew what it looked like inside and out. Imagining a hollow of the ship in front of her, Mitra opened a portal in the bridge that went out into space. With the bridge doors shut, she and Dallas couldn't hear anything happening inside, but she knew what the scene would look like. A glowing blue ring opening in the center of the bridge, to everyone's momentary shock and horror before they are sucked out with the escaping air. Some would try grabbing the edge of the portal to hang on for dear life, but would be swept away regardless. She kept the portal open for a minute or so. Life support would keep supplying the bridge with air, so the vacuum would continue throughout the time she held the portal open. Once satisfied, she started closing the portal, tensing as she waited for any resistance. None came. Nothing obstructed her from closing it, much to her relief. Opening another portal into the bridge in front of her, she stepped through, feeling familiarity running through her, yet something felt off. It was because this was a cargo vessel rather than a warship. Or perhaps it was the deadening silence, the lack of hushed activity that was bothering her. Dallas poked his head through the portal before walking through himself. "Where's the bridge crew?" "In space." Mitra made her way to the captain's seat. It was small, without any notable features except a small display on its armrest, probably for checking the manifest. She'd have to take a look at that later when the power returned. "What do you mean, in space?" Dallas cried. Mitra turned to him, frowning. "Dallas, how familiar are you with space hosts?" His skin color deepened, now the color of tree leaves, which was a Maquis version of a blush. "I am not very," he admitted with difficulty. "I can see that, but how unfamiliar? How much did you know before joining the Spacebenders?" To her amazement, his skin color darkened even further, into a sickly green that was hard to look at. Dallas started scratching the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable with this line of questioning. "That day existed," he said, his voice squeaking at the end. Resisting the urge to facepalm herself, Mitra let out a quiet sigh and explained. "Space hosts can open portals even where they can't see, as long as they know where they're opening it. I've studied schematics of the ship beforehand, and so opened a portal in the bridge out into space. Philandra, our other full space host, would have done the same for the central bridge." Dallas nodded in understanding, his color returning to normal. "I apologize. It must be irritating to having to explain that." She shrugged. "You're not the first person being ignorant on host, nor will you be the last. At one point, you get apathetic to the whole thing." After examining the rest of the bridge, which was spotless after the exposure to vacuum, Mitra reopened the channel she had used earlier. "Mitra here. What's everyone's status?" "Central bridge has been taken," Maxillium said stiffly. "Trying to get everyone sorted to get us out here the second power is restored." "We're good here," Silicon declared curtly, likely done in contrast to Maxillium's response. "Salak here has done magnificently," Q announced loudly, inciting a groan from Silica. Knowing him, he was probably flourishing the Salak despite none of them being able to see it. "I, however, am getting severely bored, and I was just being used as target practice not long ago." Shaking her head, a small smile on her lips, Mitra told him, Tell Salak to start restoring power to his ship and repairing the Etian field generator, and then make your way to the frontal bridge. Silica, divide the recruits and start them on scavenging. I want every piece of Royal Guard armor and plasma arm collected and sorted by damage. Maxillian, send any spare men you can to the frontal bridge. All clear? Mitra waited until receiving her acknowledgments before leaving the channel, sitting down in the captain's seat, and unconsciously tried turning on the holo display of her itinerary, before remembering this wasn't her ship. There wasn't a holo projector installed in the seat even if there was power. Leaning against the backrest, she fingered the collar of a Commodore coat. Black with 2 blue stripes going down the length of the left side and one along the edges. It was shorter than the coat's admirals were given, reaching to her knees rather than her ankles, with an inner pocket for a small plasma arm. She knew her former colleagues wondered why she still donned it after deserting the Ascending Navy. Those who had known her thought she wore it as a statement. Others thought it was a targeted insult toward everything it stood for. The truth was far simpler than either group realized. The bridge brightened as power returned to the ship, the armrest display returning to life. Shutting her eyes against the light, Mitra slowly opened them, letting them adjust. Even without the earlier darkness, she would have found it unusual for the bridge to be so lit up. The lighting in the Ascending Navy cruiser bridges were dimmer, and the metal hues darker than the dirty light gray used here. Dallas unlocked the entrance to the bridge. Maxillian's med should be here soon, and I want both bridges manned and ready as soon as possible. Mitra turned the chair as Dallas opened the entrance to see Q waiting outside, as if he was leaning with one leg against the frame of the door with his elbow. Mitra knew if she got closer, she would see he was leaning on nothing. He would likely reduce his gravity to allow him to stay in that position and not fall, and position himself exactly to create this image once the entrance opened. Mitra couldn't help but let out a chortle. How long have you been waiting there in that position? If you knew, it wouldn't be as funny. Giving him a wide grin, Mitra waved him order. Returning back to standing like a normal person, he started to move forward despite not walking. Coat flapping, he flew over, his hands casually in his pockets before slowing, coming to a stop right next to her. Most space hosts would envy the skill required to manipulate their gravity with such finesse. You've improved, Mitra commented. Despite having nothing to do with Q's progression, she felt slightly proud. Not as hard as you hosts make it out to be, she said, putting a bit of venom into the word hosts. Expression falling flat, Mitra tried changing Q's gravity to throw him up. Startled, Q started to fall upwards, the end of his coats rising, but only lasted for a moment before returning to normal. Whatever allowed him to duplicate Space Host's power of gravity manipulation also corrected any unwanted changes made to it. Q turned to her. I told you not to use your powers on me, ever. And I believe I told you not to insult my hosts, she countered. Instead, you mocked their sacrifices just for the fact they are hosts. If they weren't incompetent, I wouldn't mock them. Her eyes narrowed. Retract the face portion of your suit. You don't need it right now. Q didn't listen immediately, as to not appear subservient, but the portion of the atmospheric suit covering his face retracted into somewhere, revealing Q's face. Sideburns running down his chiseled chin, he was glaring down at her past his nose. Thank you. Now tell me, what is incompetent about Manak's performance? They completed the task set out for him, disabling the Etian generator. He wouldn't have died if he wasn't. Mitra's eyes flared. People die on missions, she said icily. If you have the powers of a god and still die, it's your fault you died. Mitra vaguely took note of Dallas preferring to raise his plasma arm in the corner of her eye, but kept her attention on Q. We aren't gods. Everyone treats them like they are, Q said bitterly. That for just being a host, you're inherently superior to adals like me. The word Idal made Mitra raise an eyebrow. That's only a phrase used commonly among the more prestigious and wealthy in the Ascending territory. She overheard a few particularly vexed captains mutter it under their breath, and knew the royal family spoke it with some familiarity. It was a derogatory term for the masses or normal people, as they saw it. What Q didn't realize, and what made it so ironic for him to use the term in reference to himself, was that most people didn't know what the word Idal meant. Despite what Q thought, he was far from a normal person. Do you believe I think that? Mitra challenged. That gave Q pause. You valued him more, he finally said. As much as I value someone practiced at firing a plasma arm over someone who hasn't ever held one. One is simply a more useful tool. Holding her gaze a little longer, Q finally relented, looking away. She knew she wasn't going to get an apology, but lack of a retort was a silent admission that he was wrong. At that moment, the men Mitra had asked Maxillium for arrived, taking their positions at the various consoles. Within the minute, the bridge was ready for her command. Q, I'm going to be preoccupied until we get this cruiser moving. Go see what my medic can do about that plasma burn and freshen up in the frigates, she told him. Don't have to tell me twice, he said, starting to leave. Oh, and Q, Mitra called. He hummed acknowledgement. You can cease your jamming now. Done, he yelled from down the corridor. In that case, Mitra said, now talking to her bridge crew, I want to be notified of any further transmissions being received. Navigation, set first for the system's hyperring. We leave the moment Halleck finishes renaming our 18 field capacity. Coordinate with the frigate's pilot. I want to keep the shoe tips connected as we make our course. The crew acknowledged orders, and Dallas walked over to take his place beside her. Dallas, Mitra said. He looked down at her. Yes? Do you have a task for me? No, you're fine where you are. I just need to make something clear. She turned the captain's chair toward him, using the same air of authority she used on Q earlier. Unlike Q, Dallas took a step back, looking almost fearful. The next time you see Q and I butting heads, I don't want you seeing to prepare to fire on him. Are we clear? Dallas blinked if she just poked him in between the eyes. But what if he had attacked you? He wouldn't have, she said firmly. Dallas looked down, but then brought his gaze up again, eyes determined. Forgive me for saying this, but he didn't exactly seem very amiable toward hosts. Metro tapped the display on the armrest, bringing up the beginning of the manifest. Astute observation, recruit. He indeed isn't amiable toward them. In fact, I'm pretty sure he hates them. But you needn't worry. She looked Dallas in the eyes. I'm pretty sure I'm the only host he truly respects. That is the end of the chapter. Thoughts, concerns, comments. Oh, Dun's here.
Yeah. And that is why you always depressurize your life support systems before you go into a space battle. Seriously, you freaking amateurs. Sorry. I've been reading Honor Harrington recently. They always make a point of depressurizing their spaceships before fighting goes on.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Mm.
I mean, you got bombs going off in there, and your spaceship is getting shot up. The last thing you want is, just a single hole to basically blow out an entire chamber. Besides, you're in space. Everyone's got spacesuits. Make use of them.
It is an artificial hole.
I agree with Brightness. Hats are the best.
Indeed, I do like them.
Apparently, like no one wears them anymore. I mean, not just in your story, but in general. Someone told me that. I'm like, well, if that's not in fashion anymore, so much the worse for fashion.
I wear a hat every day.
Yeah, I'm addicted to them. This is only one example. This one I got in Portugal, but it was made in China.
I see you no longer like my world building.
Oh, hang on a second. I got one.
Any particular reason, Becca?
Because of the hats thing. That's why. According to that's what I'm getting from the context. Everyone should wear hats. I no longer.
There we are.
Oh, that's a nice one.
How's that looking?
Like, to be clear, when she says who wears hats, that is more her part to being ignorant. There are places where hats are common.
That is quite gentlemanly.
Yes. By the way,
Yeah,
Becca,
the true sign that he cares about you. He spends money on you. Because a man's most valuable thing is his money.
That's
my most valuable thing is
my
money.
Is this why none of us? Is this why none of us can get a girl? We don't have money.
Yes.
Probably, pretty much.
I'm taking the piss, aspiring. Hey, for all I knew, you were serious. Unfortunately, the world building in that one could be a drag if you didn't see the previous chapter. And maybe even still.
Well, Space Host, is this something like Trills?
Well, I mentioned them in some of the other chapters. They're one of 7 kind of hosts. I can list down their abilities. They can portal, they can teleport, they have telekinesis. They have something that I'm going to call density shifting, like from have any of you guys seen Young Justice?
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
I have.
Yeah.
Matter.
Yeah, basically that. I believe that and gravity manipulation. Believe that's all they have. She's a fairly experienced one, so she can use basically all of them except density shifting, which currently only one person in the galaxy knows how to do.
So what are they hosts of? Do they have symbionts or something?
They're more like hosts to a power. That's basically how they understand them.
Oh, okay. Okay, so they don't have some kind of weird parasite thing living in them or something.
No. Technically that power can become sentient, but they don't normally. Not unless you do something really fucking weird.
Well,
Wait, no, that's because you can stay on my mic.
I do effing weird things every day, so I'm worried now.
Yeah. It's like, if they sound overpowered, don't worry. Most of them have to learn how to fucking use it.
Yeah.
And we did get a teleporter in, like, Triple's last 2 chapters. So, yeah. You probably just forgot.
Yeah.
I haven't done...
It's yeah, because I was at I think the last one was the 69th. I'm not sure which one was before that one.
Before that one was yeah, neither do I. Sometimes take large gaps because I need to re-edit these just in case. But yeah, well, how'd you think of Mithra?
Sort of interesting. She's a host as well, I gather. Is she Q superior? Something weird happened. Okay. Okay, I did notice one small thing where it looked like in his hands got repeated like twice in like the same sentence or within one or two sentences of each other. So there's that. And yeah, your other chaps got anything?
I came in partway through, so I can't really comment.
I'm good.
Right, no, that's because he couldn't stand my mic. Brightness Becker actually has a comment about Mitra up above. Ooh, she's a deserter. Cool, I'm liking her. Is it supposed to be a little bit of a contrast with Triple being kind of new to the whole thing, having a seasoned deserter? She asks. We'll have to wait till Aspiring comes back before we get an answer to that.
Sorry, someone came in the room. Wait for a second. Character's cool. I like. What question?
Okay. Okay. While you were gone, I was commenting on one small thing where you've got repetition. They've got English
Oh,
hands
yeah.
up twice.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, that is
And,
my bad.
It's no big deal. Brightness Becca has one about Mitra. Ooh, she's a deserter. Cool. I'm liking her. Is it supposed to be a little bit of a contrast with Triple being kind of new to the whole thing, having a seasoned deserter?
Well, I'm gonna slightly spoil it a bit, Becca. You unfortunately don't see her all that much in this book. You'll see her again, but you don't see her too much, unfortunately.
Bother.
Yeah. She does become important, don't worry. Just not in this book yet.
How many books are there?
I'm like in my head, I'm trying. It keeps changing number as I can't tell what. Like currently 5 or 7. I don't know. Keeps changing.
It'll end up being 14, like real time.
Well, wait. Spoilers.
Well,
I'm not. She, like I said, she'll come back.
well,
But
I don't know if they'll necessarily what is it? Mr. Aspiring will fall into the I got bored of my own story and decided to write a bunch of other books about interesting moving in different characters like the Wheel of Time does.
Or if you'll end up doing what George R. R. Martin does and says, and people will be waiting for the last book. And like, sorry, I've got this 6 trillion other major projects here. I got so enthusiastic about.
Or get an actual good computer rather than using a frickin' typewriter.
typewriter.
He uses a typewriter.
All right, well, maybe okay. I'm not okay. It's something archaic. Maybe it's not a typewriter, but it's something like
Word Star or something like that. Is that what Martin uses? It's something really weird that I'm not sure I'd heard of.
DOS, I think. I'm pretty sure
it's
it
a
uses
DOS running computer. A DOS WordStar 4.0 processor.
I hated DOS.
But okay, what did you guys think of Q and Mitra's dynamic?
Oh my gosh!
What?
Oh my gosh!
It's not. I think he's talking about. I don't
That's
think
what
he's
he
talking
uses.
Seriously?
Jesus.
Yeah,
about.
No
That's
wonder he
what
takes so
Mark-
much time.
Click
Dude.
on it or something. Click on it one of his images.
Is he trying to keep his story like off the fucking internet or some shit? Is he trying to make sure no one can hack into it?
probably.
Probably. That. Oh yeah, that's a quite charming little thing. It's got the old floppy drives.
Yeah.
Click on one of the ones with the screen showing the DOSy stuff. If you don't mind.
Like this?
No,
this?
the screen. This like the one in the lower right hand corner. See if we can get a bigger one of
this?
that. Yeah, see if we can get a bigger one of that. Just because it looks so.
I think that's the. Let me zoom in. Yeah, it looks I was just sorry to derail us. I was just like, that is an archaic piece of technology.
That's archaic. I mean, that is archaic. I mean, I'm telling you it's archaic, so you know it's archaic.
If the boomer says
Yeah.
it's old, it's older than humanity has been alive.
Yeah, it's old. That whole thing is old.
At least the humanity that matters.
Yeah, well, the humanity that matters started in 1990 anyway. So hey,
But yeah,
Oh,
so what did you
don't
think
mean
of?
1995? That's when I was born.
Wait,
That's
this
when I was born. No, 1995 is when it started. When I was born.
this
Okay,
computer is
so-
as old as you?
so Tarek doesn't count
No,
then.
it's well, he's in the. So it's like history started with seven. Have you ever heard the phrase "history started with 1776"? Everything previous to that was a mistake.
No, I haven't heard that, but that sounds like a very American thing to say.
Yeah, it's the most American of American men. Ron Swanson says that in the middle of Britain, which is hilarious.
Ron Swanson's good.
Yeah, Ron Swanson. Crying appropriate at funerals and the Grand Canyon. Fish is for recreation only. Fish meat is practically a vegetable.
I disagree with that so much, but meh. This is my brother off.
I think this chap needs to die screaming.
Maybe we
What
should
is-
watch
what-
Parks and Rec.
Please
Maybe we should
do.
watch
I will
Parks and
gladly
Rec.
come on.
Yeah, but
I
don't
haven't-
worry, we'll be watching. Go for it.
It was on Netflix for a while. I lost the chance to see it because I didn't realize it was good until after.
To which my brother would reply, "What happened?" It sounds like your family loves the Bard. It seems like your family loves the Bard.
Who wouldn't?
So, you were saying, aspiring. You had a question, I think, and I interrupted. I apologize.
I still have I'm just gonna go down the list of things to be like, let's see if this chapter's shit or not. What'd you guys think of the dynamic between Q and Mitra?
Entertaining.
Yeah, they seem to get along reasonably.
Bright Lord, I'm sorry not to derail, but did you click on brightness is when she said to my brother which my brother would reply, what happened in 1776
I
again?
did.
Yes,
I
it
did.
is
I
forever
mentioned
on
that
stream now.
previous.
Good. He's quite right.
To
Nothing
answer
very
your,
good.
to answer
Carry
your
on,
earlier
sorry.
question, Balerion, you asked if Mitra's Q superior, kinda. He's a freelance and he's currently just working under her for this job, which is why there's a bit of a dynamic where at one moment he's under her, at the next moment he's not. Did everything go smoothly? Was it all understandable and not boring?
I came in
got
a
it.
little bit later, but it seemed like it was pretty fine.
Yeah, I think I understood.
So basically, this is the aftermath of the fight in the last chapter.
Continuation, yeah.
Okay, so I did get something. Good. I did get that.
Yes.
And there was some byplay going on, like you mentioned, between Q and Mitra.
Yeah, from what I've gotten from anyone who's read those chapters is that they like Q and Mitra's dynamic.
Yeah.
Which is why I've included more of her, because I didn't expect that.
Yeah, that's good. To if somebody likes something, then say, hey, well, I'll put a little bit more in as long as
It's like, you guys like this character. Okay, let me include more of them.
keep the readers happy. What was I gonna say? Who's the one who doesn't like hats? Which is the one that doesn't approve of hats?
Mitra. And it's less she doesn't approve and more she's like, who the hell wears them nowadays?
Then she must die for saying that.
Oh, shame. I guess Mitra's gonna now die. I need to write that into the series.
Wouldn't it be right? I actually did write that into it because I said that.
Probably not. I still don't know what I'm gonna do with her at the very, very end. Her and Q are kind of intertwined in that regard. You got this. Oh, thank you. Do you? Hello. I don't know how to say your name. Becca, if you want to read more of my stuff, it's in the server that you're in. It's all listed. Yes, there is hat supremacy. Okay, this is in Star Wars. There is actual hat supremacy. Let's be clear on this. Cad Bane is one of the most competent characters, and he wears a hat. Argument confirmed. Hats are great.
Darth Vader. Who would Darth Vader be without his headpiece?
Perry the Platypus becomes a badass just by wearing the fedora. Okay,
That's
so
the powers.
I actually cannot stand Phineas and Ferb.
I watched it as a kid. Okay, mate. It has good moments.
It's not a bad show. It's not a bad show at all. I just find it repetitive and I hate Candace.
Candace.
I've occasionally had dreams where wearing a hat gave me superpowers.
Also, by repetitiveness, I'm pretty sure they literally repeated their first episode, but with music. Like that was a literal thing they did.
Oh yeah, they definitely did that. And it's basically just formula. And it's different. But I'm just like, I need a plot, please.
Nah.
Honestly, the most interesting thing was just Perry and Dr. Doofenshmirtz.
We're post-narrative
Yeah, you
now.
can pick up any. Yeah, you can pretty much pick up any order of Finish and Ferb. You don't have to watch it in order. It's kind of like Friends, where there's actually no. Friends has a plot compared to Phineas and Ferb. Same with How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, each episode is very disconnected, with only occasional callback if it's relevant.
Yeah, by the way, like Phineas and Ferb is not one of those like it's mainly like this show is not for me. It's very much like I can laugh, but I will not watch it religiously. Like I'll watch something like Suits, and honestly, something like Suits is way funnier. Because Rick, I think it's Rick Offer. It's the guy. Rick Hoffman is freaking hilarious.
So you missed Carl Saylor had one about Logan, the Wheel of Timey chap, and I finished off the rabbits.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Also, I will have to leave because the reason that someone came in the room is that I have to do this weird social service thingy.
Oh dear.
Like the government sent a threatening letter being like, please do this now or be fucked.
Uh-oh. Oh, that sounds
Was
like
it
a
really
riot.
the government?
Or is it-
Because a lot of scammers try
or is
to get stuff out of that from you.
It was the government.
Oh, so they are forcing you into prostitution. Lovely.
No comment.
Yep. So unfortunately, I have to go handle that for this entire weekend. So I will see you. Thank you for all listening in.
Have a riot.
See you later.
Alacandeus.
Yep, he was saying that the rabbit story showed proved I was a boomer, and you know why? Is that the more youth culture, the rule is that if you're older or middle aged, the more you do youth culture lingo, the more you prove that you're not youth culture.
How do you do, fellow
It's an
kids?
Yes.
Speaking of which, I actually have that.
How do you do, fellow kids?
Yeah.
Pretty much. There's even a trope. There's even a TV trope. The totally radical trope.
Yeah. So, Dunn, what have you got for us today?
So I'm just going to be continuing Shades of Redemption, which is basically the idea is that this strange used car salesman, eldritch god type is selling strange rings to leaders of countries because he has a war against the elves that he's trying to prepare for, and he's given a ring to either side of this conflict, and he and the ruler of this country fought a single combat against a champion of the other side, only to have it end in a draw, and then the Eldritch God basically breaks his brain and forces him into servitude.
I think you should model all the elves after the ones in Max Magician.
Oh, I was thinking more Shadows over Innsmouth.
Who?
Shadows over Innsmouth. Have you ever read H.P. Lovecraft?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
They're basically fish people. They live under the sea.
No, the greatest elves are the ones in Max Magician. That's the acme of elfdom.
Acme? Don't you mean Ascendancy or Apex?
What's wrong with Acme?
Because that's a science corporation in the Looney Tunes universe.
Ah. Ugh.
And what's wrong with Looney Tunes?
Oh,
What's wrong with Looney Tunes?
It is an actual that's an actual word, not an acronym. Huh? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
What? You didn't know the word Acme? Really?
I thought it was just an acronym for a made-up science corporation.
Oh, you really didn't know that it also means zenith, apex, apogee, etc.? Okay, now you know. I'm sorry.
Okay. So does that count as? So does this not count as slang since it's from the 16th century?
Acme isn't slang. It's a perfectly normal English word.
Like stymied.
Shut up, you idiot. You're not actually an idiot, but shut up anyway. I'm such a nice guy.
Not impressed.
You did hear a bit about register, right? Maybe you don't know what register means, or you think it's a cash register or something.
Depends whether it's register for your vote or register for food stamps.
Neither. Register in terms of in terms of language. Yep, and I gave her flashbacks. First, I gave her flashbacks, then I called you an idiot. So I'm really batting whatever the expression is, 100 or whatever.
So does this warrant showing, Daddy, would you like some sausage?
No.
How
If
dare you?
If you do that, I'm not going to hear any of your story.
Is it really that? Is it really that bad? I'm kind of desensitized, but
Yes, it is.
well, at least I'm not showing the man eating, biting off an umbilical cord with his teeth, or swinging the baby around. But maybe I should get that one.
If you do, well, you'll drive everyone away, not just me. You even drive yourself away if you did that.
Well, I've seen that so many times that I'm just like desensitized to it. I can't get it out of my head. Daddy, would you like some sausage?
Then mute yourself.
Alrighty. So this is Chapter 2, The Beastmaster. Amora was having the dream again. She couldn't run. She couldn't move. She couldn't hide. All she could do was endure the torture all over again. She didn't have the dream every night, but when it did, it hit just as hard as it had the first time. You're a freak, her father snarled as he shoved her backward into the mine shaft. Amora screamed as she fell, fear boiling inside her. The abrupt and sudden crash as Amora hit the ground, her bones shattering with a sickening crunch. And yet, she didn't die. Amora cried and cried, unable to move, trapped in her pain-racked body. Please, speed up. But it didn't. She had to live with the pain until the dream had run its course. Without thinking, she'd reached out with her mind, trying to lash onto an animal that would at least give her some form of relief. At last, she grabbed onto a cat who'd made its way down the shaft. Without hesitation, she forced the creature to run off and draw someone to her location. Eventually, she'd come upon a group of mining slaves. As soon as they saw the cat, they chased after it, likely starving for some fresh meat after who knew how long without. Finally, the slaves had found her broken and destroyed body. We should leave, Kamul, one of the slaves said, drawing away from her. She wanted to scream at him to help her, or at least put her out of her misery, but all she could manage was a whimper. No, the one called Kamul had said, walking over to her and carefully testing her arms and legs. When he got a whimper, he stopped and moved on, finally pulling off his ragged vest and eyeing it to his lantern pole. Come on, I can't carry her back to camp by myself. She's dead, son. One of the older slaves shook his head. Poor girl's clearly has her arms and legs broken, possibly her back as well. I have to try. Kamul shook his head. We have to help. Some of the other slaves exchanged wary looks, but they removed their shirts or vests and started helping Kamul to make a makeshift litter. Amora had never been so thankful in her life. Despite his initial protests, the old men and Garen had tended to her with the skill of a master physician, carefully setting her bones and feeding her as if he were his own child. Kamul and the others worked extra to cover the old man's absence in the mines. Finally, she felt well enough to speak with her rescuers. It came out as a hoarse croak at first from lack of use, but when Garen heard a raspy whisper, he had to grab Kamul and the other slaves. My name is Amora, she recounted. My father is Charlin, the Lord Governor over the mining pits. Lately, I've been displaying strange abilities, like when I made the cat go near you and draw you to me. My father tried to kill me by throwing me down the mine shaft, but here I am. Once the story was concluded, Kamul and the others had discussed the situation in hushed tones. They tried to go out of earshot out of her, but Amora invaded the mind of a small rat in order to covertly eavesdrop up on the conversation. We should find a place to leave her, Jason, ever the pessimist said. If she's found, they'll kill all of us. No, Kamul said firmly. She could be our way out of here. How? Jason countered. She's a cripple, unable to do anything. Well, what will happen to her father when the other lords find out that he did? Kamul asked. I don't know how it's done here in Braith, but in the West they will condemn him for attempted murder. Braithen nobility or filth. Marn spat to the side. They can murder their own mothers, and not even the king would do anything. The law doesn't mean anything unless you're a peasant. We're not going to abandon her. We'll glance to the side toward Amora. We're going to escape, with her help. It took several arguments from Kamul to convince his friends, but after she demonstrated the extent of her powers, they'd finally given in. The first step was getting rid of the overseers and freeing the other slaves. Amora forced the hundreds of rats and other cave dwellers to devour the overseers, while Kamul and the others broke up the pens and armed the slaves. A hand on her shoulder pulled her out of her rest. Amora opened her eyes to see Kamul standing over her bed, clad in a set of dark armor. When she looked closer, she saw that it was his old set, but the color had changed to a black so deep it seemed to eat light. Are you all right? She said eagerly. I'm fine. He smiled and took her hand. Better than fine, even. So this is the one you were telling me about, Kamul. A tall man with a gaunt face walked over them, eyes strangely iridescent in the light of a small candle. I see why you wish to save her. She burns with great power. Amaris wanted to shrink back from the strange visitor. Who is this? She asked, fear coloring her voice. There was something about him, a clearly visible aura of power emanating from all around him. It's all right. Camille's tone was comforting as he squeezed her hand, middle fingers gentle. I found a way to heal you. Fear was immediately replaced by hope as soon as she heard that. Really? She asked, eyes flicking back and forth between the two. I don't have to deal with this pain anymore? And more. The stranger removed a ring from a small box in his hand and slid it onto her finger. Be made whole. His voice didn't rise, but it was full of power. The instant that his hand left hers, the ring clamped onto her finger, sensation rushing back into her body as the constant pain vanished without even a particle of what remained. Gasping, Amora sat up, hand grasping onto the covers and throwing them aside. Mind still reeling, she pushed herself to her feet for the first time in years and stood by herself. She raised her hand to her face, experimentally moving her fingers and swinging her arms around. I can walk. She couldn't continue. The emotion was much too strong. Unable to restrain herself, Amora rushed to Camilla and wrapped her arms around her faithful friend, crying into his chest. I'm whole, she whispered. I'm whole. You're never broken. Camilla held her close, almost like how she imagined a big brother might. That made her cry even harder. The unfamiliar man was looking at Camilla with a strange expression on his face, speculative almost. You are not what I expected, he said after a moment of careful observation. More or less than you thought, Camilla asked, letting go of Amora as he patted her back, gently allowing her to unload all of her pent-up emotions through a flood of tears. More, Malachor said slowly. Quite a bit more. Casually, he offered her his hand toward Amora. Come, allow me to show you what you are capable of. Sniffling, Amora wiped her nose and patted Camilla's arm to indicate she was done. Dutifully, he let her go. What can I do? She asked. Come, he offered again, hand still at her chest. I'll help you through. Camille knows the way already. Are we going somewhere? Amora asked. You'll see. Camille put his hand on her shoulder. We have a new home, Amora. Our new lord has granted it to us. Where? Amora asked, gazing at her new master. Something inside her was protesting against any master, but something was suppressing her will. Slowly, though, everything faded away. There was only the desire to serve. Follow me. Malachor took her hand, and the world shifted. Amora gasped and looked down at herself, a strange suit of armor and black cloak appearing on her body, an eyeless mask made from dark metal appearing on her face, though she could see clearly despite the lack of apertures in the metal. She reached up to feel the mask, discovering a pair of curved horns extending from the top of her forehead. What is this? She asked, looking down at her hand, marveling that the ring was still on her gauntleted hand. She'd never worn armor before. She'd always been too frail. This, though, this felt as light as air. This is the world between the realms of the living and the dead, Malachor explained, glowing with fiery light as while she and Camille were shielded in shadow. This ring grants you the ability to draw on this realm's power, though eventually your body will be consumed, leaving only your mind and soul behind, enclosed by this armor. Immortal, unchanging. At least I can walk, Amora thought, still looking down at her ring. It fascinated her. It enthralled her. Follow me. The stranger put his hand on her shoulder. Then she felt it, the pull of an inexorable force dragging her through the air and out the window into a striated black and gray sky. She turned to see Camille flying beside them, body suffused with a dark green and black smoke. Despite expecting to feel nausea being so high up, without a bird's constitution to set her nerves, Amora felt exhilarated as they traveled farther and farther south. Finally, they reached a large fortress founded of white stone, black iron mounted onto the battlements to afford extra cover for the defenders. But there was something strange about the city. All over the city, a light emanated from the stones as if they were alive. However, the light coming from it was a sickly, indescribable hue that seemed to twist the eye. Characteristically, Amora found herself admiring the tall tower and wide city around it as they descended toward the walls. Abruptly, Kamul vanished, his dark aura remaining behind for a few seconds before our Malachor pulled Amora back into the world. As he pulled her back, Amora could feel the transfer between realms going through her, but as she did, she felt the knowledge of how she would be able to do it on her own slide into her mind. As soon as they re-entered the physical world, the strange light of the city faded away, leaving only bone-white stone. People in black Olympian garb wandered through the streets, 3 blue skulls instead of the usual moons emblazoned on their chests and sewn into their sleeves. Amazing, Amor whispered, looking down at her legs and flexing her toes. Felt so strange to be able to finally use those after all this time without their use. So why is this place glowing in the world beyond? Because of the stones, Malachor stroked the rampart with a single hand. I created this fortress by transporting stones from the other side and infusing my blood into each section of the mortar and piece of masonry. He rested on the 2 of them. This place will draw you back should you be defeated in battle. Your rings will be pulled here due to the nature of the power you draw on. Amora looked down at her ring and closed her hand in a fist. So how long will we have these? As long as your service lasts. Malachor tapped his fingers against his elbows. Which could be a very long time, possibly centuries. But in exchange, I will grant you eternal life. Though eventually your bodies will fade, leaving nothing behind. But we'll still have these powers? Amora asked. Yes, they will still be yours, Malachor promised. Your own natural abilities will be enhanced, as new ones will be granted as you learn to master the powers of the rings. Good. Amora closed her hand. I'll pay any price just to keep this. Malachor nodded. Said to her, then turned his attention to the mole. Follow me, both of you. Without a word, he vanished, leaving an afterimage behind him. Shrugging, Kamul followed, which Amora followed quickly thereafter. They flew through the air to the central tower, where 3 figures with a similar aura to Kamul waited. As soon as they re-entered the physical world, their auras faded into their black clothing, that there was something about their eyes that was abnormal. There were strange veins surrounding their eyes and across their cheeks, dark orange irises burning in their face. 2 of them were men, one of them almost as tall as Malachor, certainly taller than Kamul. The other was more stocky and compact in his build. The last one was a woman with long black hair, likely the same height as Kamul. She had a sultry look about her eyes and mouth, very angular face, and when the woman looked at her friend, there was clear interest. Interesting. She thought, Amorgel thought as she glanced toward Kamul, who was studiously not avoiding looking at the woman. Very interesting. My lord, the tall man knelt, followed by the other 2 Olympians. I assumed the excursion to Braith was a success. He nodded to Kamul and Amora. 2 more have joined our ranks. You were expecting only 1. Yes, Malachor took a deep breath and nodded toward the tower. We have enough to start moving west. I want the entirety of Olympias moved off the island and onto the mainland. Amora frowned in confusion but remained silent. Kamul didn't. Isn't Olympias the height of civilization? The jewel of the modern world? He asked. Because it's vulnerable to attack from the sea, Farah explained, folding her arms. Orange eyes narrowed slightly. The capital itself has been attacked several times by the enemy, and our own ships that they took from our colonies up north. The stocky man grimaced. After all the work I put into them. There will be more ships soon. Malachor flicks his hand. There are 2 that I know will be very pliable to the offer of power. An offer of power in exchange for their allegiance. Casually, he motioned to the stocky man. Come with me, Morgamir. Amora, you as well. Your gifts with the beasts of the sea, of the land, will be particularly useful on the ocean. The what? Amora demanded. You cannot drown if that is your worry. Morgamir didn't say it with any malice, just stating facts, and she could tell that he was just trying to be helpful. It was the same way she could tell that the dark-haired woman was attracted to Kamul. Besides, I will make sure that you do not require saving. You have my word. How kind, Amora thought, genuinely touched by his offer. Thank you, she smiled. We should leave immediately. Malachor turned toward Kamul and the tall Olympian man and woman. Go to Olyntius and hold it. Use the Aesir to move quickly between Mordreth and the island, while I gather my allies to begin moving our people off the island. And that's the end.
I think it goes without saying, but do not accept rings from people. Especially not magical rings.
No.
Get Malachor, it pays.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So let's see. There's a material and spiritual worlds, and they're traveling part of the time in the spiritual world.
Kind of like purgatory. Kind of like a sense of purgatory, where it's a very like striated, chaotic world that doesn't quite look right.
Undead.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Zombies.
Yeah.
Did Malachor kill them?
No, they are not dead. However, their bodies will rot away, though their spirits will remain tethered to the earth permanently.
Basically,
Yeah.
Nazgul.
Yeah, they are basically Nazgul.
Oh, how? Oh, that's lovely. Oh, well, of course, Kamul. Duh.
Yeah, I figured that since Tolkien does nothing with this character, I figure he's fair. The name is fair game.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, none of the
If nothing
Nazgul-
else, you just say it's an homage.
none of the Nazgul are really meant to be characters in that sense.
Yeah.
It does have one short bit that's from the point of view of the Nazgul, but it doesn't last very long. What else did I note? I think I was basically just noting what was going on. Malachor, the horns thing, but that's part of our armor, right?
Yes, that's part of her armor. Yeah.
And the weird light is in the purgatory place.
Yeah.
And they're gonna defend it against. They're gonna defend it against elves? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, the idea is that they're going to be using it against aquatic, water-breathing elves.
Okay, basically, mer elves.
Yeah. Yeah, they are, yeah, like, they can shift between kind of fish-looking people and normal people, but they still have blue skin.
Blue skin, okay. What's this about trans Tweety?
I have Tweety. It's a bird from Looney Tunes.
I know who Tweety is.
Oh, I didn't know.
Of course I know who Tweety is. Duh. Tweety and Sylvester, duh. That's not what I'm asking. Trans Tweety. That's
I don't know.
what I don't know about. Anyway, that's not in your novel.
Mm-hmm.
It's a guessing not. Suppose you could put that in if you wanted to. Might be a bit of a tonal whiplash if you did, though. So I think that's it. It's certainly interesting. Basically, these beings are kind of Malikor's slaves now. Do they eventually revolt, or are they going to be enslaved to him forever? Or is that a spoiler?
They are enslaved until he dies.
Oh, okay. That's a good way of putting it, because that way you're not actually spoiling anything. Because not revealing whether it actually does die or not.
Yeah. It's basically Morgoth or Sauron, but it's a little bit more gray, I guess is the best way of putting it.
He has more charm, although Sauron could occasionally be charming.
He was described as so beautiful that even the elves were taken in by him.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Lord of
it
Gifts.
works. It works.
Alrighty. I think that concludes things. Thank you all for coming. We will we'll do the Wheel of Time book reader stream on
Tomorrow, right? No, yeah, tomorrow. No, book readers.
Is
So
it?
the show watcher thing will be right after. Will either be, I think, is gonna do Saturday right after the episode finishes up, and then we'll do the book readers on Monday, since the movie night is Saturday. I'm gonna be watching How to Train Your Dragon with them, and then I'm gonna figure out something for Wednesday. I know that I want to do more Dark Souls. I did a little bit of off game and playtime to kind of get a little bit further in the game, off stream game time. So I'm a little bit further than I was, but should hopefully give some variety rather than like me watching me die to the same thing over and over again.
Well, I think you died to different things, though. It wasn't always the same thing.
Oh, it's like the same stretch, same stretch of stuff.
Well, sometimes you died right away. Sometimes you went for several minutes without dying.
Yeah, it sucked.
It was.
I know. Where's the fun in watching someone not die?
Alrighty. Well, we will call it good for today. Adios, my friends.
See ya.
Have a riot.
Cut, print, check the gate, moving on.